Hi, welcome to another episode of The Network Effect with us, Emily.
I'm Gina.
Nice to see you again. If you were with us on episode 2, we talked about the ABCs of immigration, and today we're going to talk about the DEF of immigration.
DEF stands for
Digital Nomad.
EOR.
Fees.
And we have a sneaky little G in there, but we'll let you know what that is a little bit later.
So to kick it off, we wanted to talk a little bit more about some global trends that are happening. That is mostly around the digital nomad visa. So the digital nomad visa started off in 2020 with Bermuda. So the first country to initiate sort of their concept of a digital nomad visa. And since that has happened, a further sort of 40 countries have followed suit. Either they have implemented their own digital nomad visas or they're considering implementing a digital nomad visa. So very recently in the news was Spain a week ago, mentioning that they've now initiated their digital nomad visa. We also know that there are some countries that are looking into digital nomad visas in sort of the next month to even the next year. One of them is Thailand.
South Africa is one as well.
And so, and I think that there's a couple more countries and clusters sort of around Southeast Asia, also seeing some trends in South America. A lot of the countries in the Caribbean, though, have already announced their digital nomad visas. So they're sort of, the other areas are catching up at the moment. So it's a trend that we expect to continue. And we know that it is continuing because there's already been quite a few announcements about what to expect in the coming months. But the digital nomad visa is a really interesting concept because it allows people to work from a location for sort of a shorter period of time or an unspecified period of time and not necessarily be employed in that location. And the reason that that is particularly interesting is it ties really nicely to E of the conversation,
which is EOR, which stands for an employer of record. So an employer of record is a third party organization which hires your employees on your behalf or on their behalf, I guess. And they will manage the contracts, the payroll, they will manage any employment or HR type of burden. And they really hire your staff on your behalf, but within their organization. So it takes away any risk or compliance concerns that you might have if you're looking to move 1 or 2 employees into a new location. So, for example, if you were looking to relocate 1 employee from the UK into South Africa and you would not be interested in setting up an entity there, or it might not be in your business objective right now, you could hire an EOR to move that person there and hire them on the EOR's contract on your behalf. And this is a really great option for companies who are looking to relocate 1 or 2 employees. The one thing EOR doesn't do as of yet is the visa or immigration piece, but it ties really nicely into a relocation type of package in the sense that they manage anything else that's really to do with HR and compliance around paying your taxes and, like I mentioned, payroll and compliance. But the immigration piece is missing from the EOR package right now. That normally means that if you are considering EOR but worried about how you would get that person there, and they might not be valid or able to maintain or receive one type of visa, you would have to go to another third-party immigration type of organization who can support you. But luckily, there are a lot of good options out there, including Centura Global. But yeah, I don't know what your opinion is on the EOR.
Well, what I think is really interesting about EORs is that based on the way that they operate, you now no longer have to be tied off by where somebody currently resides if they want to work for the organization, or if you find the right talent in the right location, or you have the right talent and maybe they're going to take advantage of a digital nomad visa for a couple of years and you want to continue employing that person, then partnering with somebody like an EOR to make sure that you can compliantly pay them and put through the documents that might be required for types of visas, like a contract, for example. That allows you to bridge that gap. So while CORs don't offer immigration services, they can help you compliantly meet immigration needs by ticking those boxes to employ someone legally in a different country where you don't have an entity set up.
Yeah. But I think if you are looking to move more than 1 or 2 or even up to 4 people into one entity, it is better to set up your own entity just because the EORs are really well tailored to a couple or a handful of employees. But once you reach a wider threshold of people that you're looking to move, the cost becomes quite heavy for a lot of organizations. So an entity setup might be a better option for you.
Yep. And that's probably a good segue into F for fees. We wanted to talk a little bit more about fees with today's discussion, the DEF of immigration, because one of the questions we get asked a lot is why fees vary so much between countries. And there's a few things that factor into that. One is that just globally, there are different types of applications that you're applying for. A J visa in the States is not the same as a spousal visa in the UK. There are different things that you have to do, different requirements, and therefore different fees that link into that. For example, in the UK, you might have to pay an NHS fee to subscribe you to the local medical system. It's something that I've been through a couple of times. And there's not always the equivalent of that in other countries. So right off the bat, that's something close to £1,000, a £1,000 difference in cost. But also, it's not just the type of application that you're applying for, it's who you are. So you might need to have your documents translated. You might need to have something, I hear the term apostilled, but I've always said apostilled. So you might have to have something legalized, for example.
Yeah.
And all of those bear an additional cost. So whilst when you look at an immigration fee and you think this is what it costs, sometimes those costs do creep up. So we like to look at immigration costs as sort of the starting from price rather than the end all, because it is going to be customized for the applicant and also for where they're going.
And then the extra little letter that we have for USG, which stands for the Great Relocation.
Yeah.
And we are seeing a massive relocation at the moment of companies. They're moving their headquarters, they're moving their people into different regions. And a big reason for this obviously has to do with costs, the current economy, what's happening politically. So that you can see people moving from the UK, for example, into other markets like Portugal. And this often requires a lot of immigration support because you're normally moving your workforce. And within that, you need to consider things like taxes. What would the taxes be for that type of role or that type of position for that individual, as well as what are the requirements? Do they meet those requirements? And if you're looking to relocate a whole team, or if your team themselves are choosing to relocate for their own personal reasons, you need to make sure that they meet the requirements for that great relocation. And we really are starting to see a trend in companies looking to move around. So I don't know what your experience has been.
Well, what I think happened is during COVID, a lot of assignments were put on hold temporarily, but the need for those assignments didn't necessarily go away. And then when things were eased, when restrictions were lessened, there was an influx of people moving. And then now there's a backlog of not immigration applications, but actual need for people to move on, take on an assignment, coupled with the normal annual amount that would be coming through. So there's a sudden influx of people who are moving, but there's also not necessarily those who need to go on an assignment for the business purpose, but there are people who've been locked in their homes for the last couple of years and have decided that it's time to do something different with their life. So there was a recent study in the UK that said 4.5 million Brits were looking to move abroad, and that we see that trend globally replicated in other markets. We see it happening in the States, we see it happening in other countries within Europe, we see it happening within APAC. And so G for the Great Relocation, we see that in the coming year, those trends will continue. There'll be more relocations, more immigration needs, and more people getting involved.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.